Welcome back to the final day of GPT Dreamin'. Today's the last day you have to soak up as much knowledge as you can from the leaders in the space as we have our final two speakers share information to help you prepare. First, we have the privilege to learn from an extraordinary mind, Sam Wadhwani. This is someone who's not only a chief technical architect at PwC, but also a seasoned expert in IT architecture, CRM technologies, and web technologies. With an impressive background, Sam navigates the crossroads of business analysis and technology like no other. He's here to help us crack the code on managing the Salesforce org with a focus on what Salesforce has said is the key to success: AI, metadata, and CRM. Get ready to be enlightened and inspired, and please join me in welcoming to the stage Sam Wadhwani.
Well, hello everybody. So my name is Sam Wadhwani, as Mark mentioned, and welcome to this session on preparing for GPT org management. A little bit about me to start off with. So as Mark mentioned, I'm a Salesforce enterprise architect and a certified Salesforce technical architect. I've got about 18 years experience in CRM technology consulting, and 12 and a half of those have been in the Salesforce ecosystem. I'm an architect coach and mentor for quite a few people around the world, and my focus has been on the financial services sector most recently. But in the past, I have also worked in the life sciences sectors and a few others as well. I will admit I'm not an AI technology expert. I'm not, what's the opposite of modest? Bold enough to stand in front of you and answer lots of AI-based questions. I do have a base and fundamental knowledge of AI, however, and some would say a few other technologies too, which allows me to understand the impact that it has on businesses and what's needed or indeed to be avoided to successfully transform for the future with scale and security and performance. I've also got a lot of war wounds from the 18 years implementing CRM technology. So that's a bit about me, and you can connect to me using the IDs on the right-hand side. So now that's out of the way, and you know a little bit about my background. I'm here to talk with you about why AI and metadata is important in org management. And my focus for this session is on how it affects the quality of what you're building. I'm going to start by somewhat reiterating what everybody else has said in the previous sessions today in the conference about the environment that we find ourselves in today and where we're starting to look at problems in a different way. I'll move on to why metadata is a thing to be considered, followed by hopefully some sparks of inspiration on where it applies. I'll cover what the drivers are and the risks when you address the challenge. We'll then finish with some actionable considerations that you can take back to your company. Now, on the right-hand side are the things that I hope we'll achieve. But truly, if I only achieve one of these for each of you, then this session would have been successful. Okay. All right. So, where are we? AI plus everything plus CRM. Now, I also call this slide the what on earth is going on slide, because the technology world is all of a sudden moving faster than many people have anticipated. And even that may be quite a significant understatement. We're experiencing a paradigm shift, as we did when Excel, databases, the N-tier architecture, for those who remember that, the iPhone, and the concept of cloud technologies were introduced. And the ground underneath us changed when those happened. Our surroundings and things that we were used to changed. And as a result, our outlook changed too. And that's where we are today. Now, when things that we know start to change quickly, we find ourselves in a world with more unknowns where we need to be comfortable being uncomfortable. And it increases our reliance and trust in what technology can do. AI is increasingly being considered for many use cases, and that's underpinned by the infamous AI learning model, certainly in the GPT use cases, as many have talked about so far in the conference. But what a lot of AI models have traditionally learned from is data. And you've seen Salesforce themselves theming their messages, AI plus data plus CRM. And that makes sense, right? Since it's the reality in an information-rich world. We've moved from focuses and concerns on data quality, data governance, to data insights and trends and other BI analytical insights, to then more recently discovery and predictions as well. And now we're in a stage where we're trying to use data with AI to learn to automate productivity more intelligently. So if in continuing to traverse that terrain means the state of your data is important, then what about the metadata that drives it? Why will AI with metadata be an important shift in our change productivity? Now, to keep up with the demand from customers, partners, regulators, etc., and to keep costs low, companies are increasingly looking into technologies that are low code, and quite rightly so, to be honest. Code is expensive, particularly when it's implemented without any adequate governance. But to implement that properly can mean more time and more skills and more complexity. So technologies that offer low code capabilities have a distinct advantage in improving the agility and speed whilst keeping overheads at a minimum. Hold on a second. Wait, I know, just listening to myself there, that sounds like I'm in favor of low code and citizen developers doing whatever they like, right? But don't get me wrong, low code is great, and I'm a strong advocate for it on the whole. But to set the record straight, it still requires proper governance. It still needs that. Okay, so before I paint myself into a corner, but a number of those good low-code platforms are driven by metadata. It's metadata that defines how the data is to be captured, controlled, and metadata that defines how it's to be used as well. And the Salesforce platform is no different. I hope he doesn't mind. I haven't actually asked him, but I'm quoting Shavary Lipinski, who you've probably watched already twice during this conference, or at least once. And I'm quoting him in saying that on the Salesforce platform, we have currently more than 600 metadata types as of summer 23, the summer 23 maintenance release. 65 of those are the most used, leading to the potential for 448 possible dependencies, which then when you plot that in a possibility matrix or a possibility space, goes into the thousands if mapped to it. In most medium to large scale implementations, the state of the metadata in both production and non-production environments is in a state of flux. You've got changes in non-production environments, and they're a given, as they're typically small BAU changes, as well as larger, more complex strategic changes, and they're all being made at the same time. We all know this, but typically the volume of changes decreases the further along the development life cycle you move. Even in production though, unless you've locked it down with tight governance policies, there are still admin related changes that are made. And all of that change is affected by the underlying metadata. In some of the smaller engagements I've been involved in, we're talking about 2, possibly 3 work streams and teams all operating on the same instance as it moves through the lifecycle. In some greenfield cases, it's only 1 team for that matter. In the larger engagements though, we're talking about multiple programs of Salesforce related change. Some of those having 6 to 8 work streams, all of which are making changes for a different business unit or a different business function or domains within the company. So what I've seen before is that it could be sales and service and operations and marketing and risk and compliance and legal, all looking to enhance the technology for their purpose. And in those situations, conflicts in the metadata or the resulting functioning of the platform that the metadata drives are frequent, and they slow the rate of change because it adds an overhead, a cost, if you will, to each change being made. The root of the issue, though, is that you never know with 100% accuracy who's working on what, and it's difficult to control whether you're building it well or making it easier to deploy, or understanding what impacts those metadata changes are leading to. So, how does it become useful to an AI model? Well, consider this. Your metadata itself forms a dictionary or a catalog of both the implementation and how it fits together. And that dictionary could contain thousands, but likely tens or hundreds of thousands, or in extreme cases, millions even, of items. If you look closely at those items, it's an intricate web of hierarchical items with names, attributes, and references to other items that themselves have the same. Those are data points, fundamentally describing the shape of components that make up the overall platform. And in most cases, that's what your business runs almost entirely from. So its health is business critical. Even more so when considered as an input to a model that could learn and help to answer questions, as well as suggest approaches that increase your business's rate of change. I expect a few in the audience are saying, yeah, and we check those using static analysis and impact analysis tools and hours of human-led intervention. Yeah, you're right. Tools such as codescan.io, Checkmarks, SonarQube, Phaeton, etc. They can use other technologies such as Apex PMD and ESLint that use abstract syntax to define rules representing patterns to look for in the metadata. So more importantly, the metadata itself, along with the output from static analysis tools, can be valuable to learn from, just as the best developers and consultants have done so for years. Now, AI models such as those used with GPT, I should say, need to be trained on large data sets to identify and understand more complex patterns than the likes of code scan and check marks and so on, and Apex PMD can do, so that it can generate a suggestion of what the answer to a prompt would be. And I say suggestion rather than a recommendation, because having used a few of them already, I've noticed it's easy to think it's producing results authoritatively or with authority. But in reality, understanding what's driving it means understanding that we can't get away from human sanitization, or the human in the loop, as most people now know it as. And it applies here with metadata, just as it does with data and language. So what about ideation then? So what if we could shift left our identification or prediction of those conflicts that we mentioned earlier, and do it early, as early as possible, really? The reality is, though, is that despite how much you analyze the static state of the implementation using the metadata, it will always change during and or after it's built and tested. So the difficulty is what will be impacted, therefore, early in the journey if I change this or that. If I do so, what issues could or would I be faced with down the line? On the other side of it, how should the change that I'm proposing be approached or implemented? What if it could consider the metadata dependencies that are sort of described by that, by the metadata, and combine that with an understanding of how the data is used or where it fits into a business process, to suggest that it's either a good or a bad candidate to be using in your solution. That's quite cool. If that's prompted no reaction in you at all today, then okay, tough crowd. But if that's prompted a, okay, I understand, hold on, or wow, or even to start you thinking about more use cases, then great. You're sort of primed for the next part. So we've seen already in some of the sessions earlier in the conference, a demo of GPT being embedded in change intelligence tools. There are many tools out there, such as Panaya and Elements.cloud, which is what you saw earlier. And they're effectively offering great AI-based features to analyze your org or write user stories from a well-documented process, or suggest functions or features that could be candidates for change to satisfy that requirement. But let's explore that a little bit further and consider the pickup of that story by a developer or even a designer or an architect. Consider training a model on your business architectural principles to instead suggest patterns that complement your existing implementation based on a technical prompt. For example, an architect updating a set of design comments on a story that instructs that to meet this requirement, we're going to need a web service to make a call out in order to update a related object record, for example. And the model has therefore identified that they're going to need to use a new external service in technical Salesforce terminology with a named credential to apply the security of authentication in a flow action, which is a specific type of metadata, that then only has an update record action afterwards. Or if we take a slightly different approach, it's suggesting it's using a code interpreter to understand the semantics of an existing Apex trigger that would therefore need amendment to call a new Apex class that calls an existing proxy class, because that's what it's understood, but then only including a DML operation, a data operation, at the very end to avoid, Salesforce governor limits, for example. And it writes that up as a transformational result on the story itself. That's very cool. Okay, let's move on to the developer. Consider the developer picking up that story and starting to build the solution, but your AI model being integrated via an API into the Git workflow so that before commits or pushes are accepted and completed, it predicts the anti-patterns or security vulnerabilities or non-compliance to design authority policies to guide the developer before it's too late. As an example, let's say that you proposed a solution that uses an existing field because it's part of a step in the sales process. But the metadata and a dependency tree shows that it's exposed in a page layout to only three user groups, two of which it's read-only to. That's very difficult to use then. Well, maybe it's also referenced in an Apex class that hasn't been run in 12 months. And the field is only 15% populated with 5% consistency. The AI model takes that information into consideration in combination, along with principles of your field level security and your data governance policy, and suggests that there are indicators that this field is not an optimal candidate for this requirement. Taking that one step further, building it into your deployment pipeline early using GitHub Actions or webhooks. Yeah. So, hold your horses. That sounds cool. That sounds very, very useful. You can see both the apparent benefit plus the direction it's going in. But let's answer the question about what risks we might face in trying to achieve it. In general, regarding AI and GPT, C-level executives today are understandably concerned, thinking about the impacts that GPT are potentially going to have on their business models, but also their operating models and their employee workforce. The other side of that is concern around, well, how difficult is it actually to do and integrate into the business? From the technical compliance aspect, there are a few areas that Salesforce have specifically called out and incorporated already into what they call the trust layer of the platform. The first of those is security. Salesforce themselves have rightly gotten ahead of the curve in listening to customers and identifying that one of the biggest barriers and concerns about the technology is trust, predominantly focused on the data that it's trained on, how it's being used, and what it's generating. But I'd argue there's also a need for trust in the use of metadata. The recent case of Samsung and Amazon employees using the tool and starting to see their own IP being regurgitated back as suggestions is a huge concern. Your IP needs to be protected and in a sustainable way. The last one is audit. And I'll tackle that one before I tackle bias. These days, as well as AI-based tools that assist the end user productivity, there are also tools that are being released that can detect whether content has been produced by a GPT technology. That is really important to those consuming what's produced to know how to act and how to treat it accordingly. It's actually, I was just thinking about this, it's actually a shame it's not a more common practice when humans do it, right? So imagine speaking to someone who authoritatively makes a statement of fact, but then caveats that they're only saying it because they heard it from Bob next door. You wouldn't treat it the same way, right? And it's true for metadata too. If we're using the tool to assist, then we need to be transparent about the basis on which decisions are made from those suggestions. So it's important to track which patterns or policies are going to be supported by the AI superhero sidekick and which ones are not. And then finally, on the issue of bias, one of the biggest topics, Salesforce have recently announced that the data cloud or Einstein Studio integration with Amazon SageMaker, and are touting a bring your own model capability coming soon, also potentially including Google's Vertex. Salesforce themselves apply the ASHES framework to their AI approach, the last S representing sustainability, particularly focused on using the right model for the right problem. But in all models, the issue of bias needs to be a focus regarding metadata in two ways, I would say. Number one, consider that you pre-train your own model based on your private set of metadata. Now, think of all the tactical nuggets and components that have been built into your code base that were risk assessed under the circumstances at the time and accepted on the basis of needing to be addressed later. I imagine there's a lot of folks in the audience sort of quietly retreating inwardly at the recall of those situations. I know I have been in those situations before. But come on, right? In all honesty, we know that that's not how it should have been built in the first place. The obvious risk in training on your own model is that the metadata represents perhaps an anti-pattern or a suboptimal pattern that the AI model may use to suggest more anti-patterns. So we're slowly perpetuating a suboptimal direction in quality. The flip side, of course, is that the human in the loop steps in, adjusts the suggestion, implementing a more widely accepted best practice. Well, that's great. So we just whacked that mole, but we haven't then entirely seen the return in productivity that AI has promised, because the human has had to do far more, or if not the same amount, as they had to do without the tool. And although we know it's not going to be perfect first time, it will take some considerable time organically before the results of that can be trusted more often than not. So, okay, that's option one. Option two, let's now think of the alternative. That it's either a public model that it's trained on, or your own model pre-trained with public industry standard patterns. In some ways, that's what a lot of companies are doing today by using the default rules only with tools such as Apex PMD, CodeScan, and SonarQube and so on, and not curating their own rules in addition. Those patterns are great and will certainly offer greater reliability, but they're fundamentally devoid of an understanding of the circumstances of your specific business and the technical estate. So again, there must be a human in the loop to be able to adjust the suggestion and apply that strategic design lens that's unique to your business. So then, we've got a rock and a hard place. So how do we get the value from this then? What's going to be important to address in order to unlock the potential of these use cases? Tools such as Code Interpreter from OpenAI are going to be game changer when we're able to understand our metadata estate a lot quicker. Not necessarily better, but we'll be able to get to the answers to make human-led design decisions faster. Salesforce has just announced the Einstein GPT for developers, which is in closed pilot at the moment and is going to be, I believe, open beta by mid next month. And we've also already got GitHub Copilot, which a few, I imagine, have had a look at too. Companies who are starting to use these tools are seeing benefits. I think I heard on Wednesday, I think it was, of a significant reduction in support tasks after implementing Flow GPT. Or, with some of the things that we're doing within our company, a 50% increase in code writing speed. The tools are rapidly entering the market. But if there's one takeaway from you, for you from this session, it's that increased productivity is one thing, but there's an opportunity for you to enable higher quality change at a faster pace. You need to address the metadata landscape that your model is going to be trained on, though. You need to bring your orgs up to date. If you're using out-of-date features that have been superseded by more native features, then without the use of public metadata, patterns, and policies to include, your model will result in undesirable bias that doesn't help to improve quality. In a similar way, identify redundancy and address it. Otherwise, it's going to skew the results of any model that uses it to learn from. The only other alternative is that you exclude that from the model, but it may be critical to your business to learn from. Review your design principles too. So go back to those architectural principles, your design principles, your integration principles, your data principles, your security principles, and refresh the patterns that are optimal for your business. Ideally, ensure that you've not only refreshed them, but you've also applied those and implemented them in your metadata itself, evidenced by, therefore, your actual build. And then finally, consider the adoption appetite and approach for your company, which is more about the culture of your business from a technology perspective when it comes to new ways of working or new technologies and tooling. Decide whether you're comfortable experimenting with the obvious benefits of time to value, or whether you prefer a slower development of a proof before investing and accepting it may take longer to get to that benefit or that value. It's an opportunity for you to enable a higher quality of change at a faster pace using AI and metadata and CRM. And with that, all that's left for me to say is a big thank you for taking the time to listen, and good luck as we go on our AI journeys together. If you want to chat more to me, please do connect to me on LinkedIn, and I look forward to speaking again soon. Thank you.
Sam, thank you so much for coming on to GPT Dreamin' Live and sharing all of your incredible knowledge. Just watching the chat as you're presenting, and everyone just really appreciating the level of detailed knowledge that you have in the AI and GPT space. So really appreciate you coming on. We'd love to do a little bit of Q&A with you if you have a moment. We have a couple
Yeah,
questions in
sure.
the chat. Awesome. So we'll jump right into some questions from the audience. Here we have Gerald. Gerald asks, what does effective governance around development look like? What are signs it is not effective?
Yeah, so governance around development. So making sure, well, the symptoms are, typically evident in the larger scale implementations, and it tends to be where you've got lots of conflicts, like I mentioned earlier. If you measure how frequently you deploy change is a good metric, or how many just code maintenance issues where there are conflicts you have to resolve with each deployment or each package that you're trying to deploy, then that's a good sign, if it's high, that it's not really effective. You're not identifying and shifting left the identification of those conflicts, the effective use or the design patterns that translate to use of the metadata. Yeah.
Sort of maybe a follow up a little bit from another person here. Yes, how can you, and in quotes, manage what you cannot monitor and measure? If, as Sam said, you never know with 100% accuracy who is changing what.
Yeah, and I think there's, so I'd say that the indicator there is in that monitoring side of things. Perhaps you're looking at the problem from a different lens. Instead of trying to monitor it, make sure or look at how you can use AI to identify where the risks are and where the impacts are earlier. Therefore, you're getting ahead of the problem and you're less likely to see those down the line.
Interesting. Okay. Following up here, what about customer worries? Can you expand a little bit from a customer standpoint? What are the main concerns that you're seeing from your standpoint that customers have that are affecting the adoption rate?
Yeah, so I think I would say that the technology is still evolving, right? And even what we're talking about today in 6 months' time is probably going to be different. It's probably going to be out of date, right? So what we'll be saying in 6 months' time or 12 months' time will be very different. I think customers are aware of that. They've got a healthy trepidation and a healthy cynicism in some cases. Some are very much sort of accepting of the potential risks, and they've got more of an appetite for that experimentation. But obviously that they may see some of the value sooner, as I mentioned at the end. Others are more concerned about the security, and it tends to be those customers who are in more regulated environments where a lot of those compliance risks or policy risks are potentially have a greater impact on their business. So they would normally have, or what we're seeing is they'll take a more cautious approach. They'll want to know more about how do we secure this, how do we operationalize the use of it in our business, how do we maintain it, how do we continue to evolve how it's embedded in our technology estate, for example. So there's a broader, more deeper level of thinking that some customers are going for. There's also a race to the top in a way, where some customers in that experimental space are very keen that they have something that is, that they're benefiting from the productivity gains, or they're leveraging that capability to drive sales through marketing or whatever it is in the market. So there's varying ones, but I'm aligned to FS, so I see a lot of the compliance and the regulatory, the slightly slower moving ones more often.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, something hit me when you said that healthy trepidation, because I think a lot of times some people describe it as unhealthy. They don't use that word, but it's like, why aren't we moving faster here? And healthy, I think that's a good term for it. Jumping into the architect's role, we're definitely starting to see the beginnings of the shift of focus and these new paths that didn't exist before from a technical standpoint. You alluded to it and talked about some of it in your presentation. Can you expand a little bit more, maybe just on that? Like, what are you seeing for architects? What's changing? What should they expect from an experience and expertise standpoint? What should they be doing and focusing on?
Yeah, and I'll reference an article that I think was posted on Salesforce Ben about what GPT and AI means for architects. Ultimately, after quite a lengthy article, here's a spoiler that I promised at the very beginning. It concluded that architect jobs are safe. That there's that it's, if anything, only going to complement and assist architects in a similar way to other job roles as well. I would say that the architect role is typically one where it's most effective based on a solid foundation of knowledge and understanding of technology, but is mostly where a lot of the value is based on the experience and knowing where things have or haven't worked and why within the business, in different parts of the business, what the longer term effects might be, and working through those risks and impacts to be able to foresee which direction we need to go in. Now, AI is not going to be able to do all of that. It can provide suggestions probably about near to medium term impacts, which are valuable. They're still valuable, but they may not be able to potentially react to future market conditions, for example, right? For a specific company. So that's what I'd say.
Yeah, that's great. That's great info. Yeah, reflecting back earlier, you had a slide and where you detailed out the future concept, and you talked about some different ways that GPT could be used inside the org. And I found that really interesting. You talked about the Flow GPT use case and implementing AI within a flow and just the power of that. That's something that I'm very, spending a lot of time on lately. Talking about the technical nature, we may want to save this question for after, so you just let me know if you want to handle it directly. With Vernon Keenan asked, you can answer here or just let me know for later. Have you ever considered using digital twin modeling technology to handle the metadata complexity of SaaS systems like Salesforce or a complex AWS development environment?
Oh, that's a power question.
That's why I wanted to give you the option.
I think I'm going to have to come back to that one, in all
All
honesty.
right.
I think it needs a bit deeper thought quite
A
openly.
lot of, yeah. All right, Vernon,
It's a
we
great
will get
question.
back
Thank
to
you,
you on that
Vernon.
one.
Yeah,
We'll
definitely.
get back to you on that one, Vernon. That wraps up our session here. It looks like we've covered all the questions we have. So if you want to go ahead and head backstage, I'll catch you backstage in just a moment, and I will see everyone out.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks. All right. Thank you again so much, Sam, for sharing your insights with the community here. Incredible session. Again, just every day, incredible content here. So, up next, to close out this incredible week full of GPT dreamers and thought leaders, Ian Gotts will be taking the stage to dig deeper into the topic of AI careers and skills for Salesforce professionals. Join me there in the next session and stick around to the end where I'll make some extremely exciting announcements about the future of GPT Dreamin'. Head to the lobby and I will see you there.